So just a few kind of housekeeping things as we get going today. First of all, this is the open forum. It's our August 2020 open forum. This is a special open forum that we're doing because normally we do these in May, the open forum in May and the congregation meeting in June. But this year we did a May and June open forum and congregation meeting, but we only passed a partial budget. We have the full budget to share with you today. And so I want to be able to do that. So we're really excited that you are here. Just a couple of things. First of all, if you have comments to make, please make them in the chat, and you'll find a little at the bottom of your Zoom screen, your webinar screen, you should see this little chat icon. It's a little conversation box with the word chat in it, as you can see. If you click on that, it should open the chat window, and it should give you a chance to make comments in that chat. Now, notice, by the way, when you do that you can send a private message to anyone who's one of the attendees, or you can send a message to one of the panelists, or you can simply send it to all panelists and attendees so that we can all see it, which is what I would obviously suggest that you would do. If you have questions, and we're hoping you have questions, that's why we're doing this open forum. Then there's a Q&A dialogue for that. We'd ask you not to put questions in the chat because we may not catch it. We may miss that question that's in the chat, and we want to make sure that all the questions do get answered. So if you click on the Q&A button, again, a little dialogue should come up, and you can post a question there. Those questions could be answered in a couple of different ways. One way they could be answered is one of the panelists could directly type in an answer. So for example, if one of you asked, what time is outdoor worship at Trinity Kimberly Way? Pastor Nick is on here as one of the panelists, and he could see that question, and he could simply type in what that service time is and hit answer, and then you would see that question and the answer to that question show up in that Q&A dialogue box. But it may be that we decide we want to answer that question out loud. And so no one would type in an answer, but instead I would have a chance to call that question up and either answer it out loud or ask one of the other panelists to answer that question for you. And so everyone can have the benefit of hearing that answer as well. Now, by the way, when those questions come up, you will have a chance to kind of upvote those questions if you like the answer or or we're glad that you got a chance to hear that answer. You have a chance to see all those questions as well. So that's how we're going to get questions answered and comments today. Now, by the way, there's not going to be any voting today. The voting will be at our September congregation meeting. That's when we're going to be asking you to vote on a couple of different things. Not only the budget that we're going to tell you about today, but the transition plan that the governing board is going to be presenting you today. Those will both be voted on in September. So no voting today. We are going to do one poll in a little bit. We are using a multiplier to decide how many people are online on any given week for our worship, and we've done that. I'll explain a little bit more later, but we've done that based on our average household size and a number of other indicators that we've gotten from other churches that have been doing online worship a long time. But we want to test that a little bit today, and so we're going to do a little poll to help us think that through. Here's the agenda that we are going to be following today. And first of all, Ken Rack is going to do our opening devotions. Ken is the chairman of our governing board and hence chairman of our congregation. And so he's going to be doing our opening devotions today. And then Ken is going to give a report from the transition team. You may know, if you were on for our congregation meeting in June, or you may have heard that at that congregation meeting in June, I announced my plans to retire in 3 years. So summer of 2023, I plan to leave full-time ministry, and I'm not going anywhere, not planning to anyway, hoping to be around and still be involved in our ministry here at Trinity at some level, but as a full-time, I'll be done in the summer of 2023. And I told the board about that 9 months ago, and they've been working hard to put together a transition plan for these next 3 years so that we have a very seamless and successful handoff of the senior leadership here at Trinity. And so they're going to be sharing that plan with you today. And again, asking you in September to vote on that plan. And then we're going to ask each one of our site pastors to give a short ministry update, something that they would like to highlight for you that's going on at their site. I want to talk about our worship plan for the fall, when we are planning to go indoors for worship, what our outdoor worship plans are, etc. So I want to help you know and understand that, and talk about our fall campaign that we're going to be doing as we do every fall. And then do want to give you the balance of the budget plan for fiscal year 21. You've already approved the first 3 months of that plan. We want to give you the rest of the 9 months now that we're a little further into the pandemic and we have a better sense of what we believe is reasonable financially. So we're going to present that to you. And again, we'll be asking you to vote and approve the rest of this year's budget at that September congregation meeting. Just one thing I wanted to highlight for you: if you would like a hard copy of the budget detail, the budget numbers that I'm going to be presenting later. I'm going to be presenting the full numbers on the screen for you. In June, I just gave you kind of a summary of those numbers. I'm going to present the full numbers for you. But if you'd like a hard copy of that, if you go to tlc4u.org, to our website, and go /meeting, the site place on the site you went to register for this webinar, there's a little link that has appeared there since last night that says FY21 budget. That's actually, if you click on that, it will let you download the PDF of the budget handout with the budget detail, with the key decisions, the assumptions, and then the line-by-line number detail. I'm going to be showing those things again on the screen, but if you'd like a hard copy or a PDF of that, you can download that there as well. So without any further ado, then I am going to stop sharing my screen, and I am going to go ahead and spotlight Ken's video so Ken can do our devotions. You should be seeing Ken now.
Okay. Well, thank you, Mark. All right. So hello, everyone. For those that don't know me, my name's Ken Rack. I have the privilege of serving on our governing board, and I also get to welcome all of us. So hello to everybody from your homes, from representing all 4 of our sites. Welcome. I'm glad we get to spend some time together. We've got a full meeting agenda today, and Mark touched on those topics. So what I want you to do is, get close to your TV or your laptop or your, tablet, because we're going to be sharing some information here on the transition plan into budget. And I think it's something that you can all follow along with to be able to see. So, we've all been talking about it because we're all experiencing it, but 2020 has been a crazy year. It's kind of wild. Everything was filled with all sorts of different challenges and hardships. But there's been some times of joy and celebration. It's just different than what we're typically used to experiencing. That range of emotions and experiences impacted things that, all of us like to do, gatherings of families and friends, and worship and work situations, and how all of that's working, to things like graduations and even funerals. So in all of these changing life experiences, we need God's help and guidance all the time. So there's a number of topics that I think will help us in our regular everyday lives, but then also for our meeting today. So there's 4 topics that I'm going to quickly cover here in our devotion. And those topics are assurance, the body of believers in serving, wisdom, and then the living hope that we all have. So, and I'm going to go with some Bible verses along the way and the purpose of just kind of keeping this short as we go forward. But under the first topic of assurance, this is from Isaiah chapter 43. But now this is what the Lord says. He who created you, O Jacob, he who formed you, O Israel, fear not, for I have redeemed you. I have summoned you by name. You are mine. When you pass through the water, I will be with you. When you pass through the rivers, they will not sweep over you. When you walk through the fire, you will not be burned. The flames will not set you ablaze. For I am the Lord your God, the Holy One of Israel, your Savior. I mean, isn't it amazing, words from 600 or 700 BC, we can still get that assurance from those words today. So now on to the second one, as far as for the body of believers and, in serving. So this is from Romans chapter 12, verses 4-8, and this is the Message version. So in this way, we are like the various parts of a human body, each part getting its meaning from the body as a whole, not the other way around. The body we're talking about is Christ's body of chosen people. Each of us finds our meaning and function as a part of his body. But as a chopped off finger or a cut off toe, we wouldn't be of much good, would we? So since we ourselves fashioned into all these excellently formed and marvelously functioning parts of Christ's body. Let's just go ahead and be what we were made to be, without enviously or pridefully comparing ourselves with others or trying to be something that we aren't. If you preach, just preach God's message, nothing else. If you help, just help. Don't take over. If you teach, stick to your teaching. If you are encouraging guidance, be careful that you don't get bossy. If you're put in charge, don't manipulate. If you are called to give aid to people in distress, keep your eyes open and be quick to respond. If you work with the disadvantaged, don't let yourself get irritated with them or depressed. Keep a smile on your face. So, we've got so many people in our congregation that are gifted in so many ways. Some serve in a public type of fashion, from, all of our praise teams and the musicians and the singers, and, some of those things are things I could do. But then we've got a lot of people that serve behind the scenes. We've got people that are, even today in outdoor worship, we're helping people find where to park, where they could wind up sitting. We've got our alert team that goes out and helps areas, locally and abroad, with when disaster help is needed. And we've got our prayer warriors that are out there on a daily basis lifting prayers up to God to help so many, many people. And there's many other people that are doing so many different things. So we all need to use and continue to use our gifts in a way to make a difference with our church, our friends, our families, and the communities that we live in. And I mentioned this last week in our last meeting, but this also requires some action on our part, which means, and we're going to talk about some of those actions that we're going to be presenting here for all of you, with the idea of this is what we can do going forward. Now, wisdom, and that's the third topic. And I know it's something that I need more of, and this is from James chapter 1. Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. If any of you lacks wisdom, you should ask God, who gives it generously to all without finding fault, and it will be given to you. But when you ask, you must believe and not doubt, because the one who doubts is like the wave of the sea, blown and tossed back and forth by the wind. As I mentioned, I know, wisdom is something that I could use more of on a daily basis. And the last item is the living hope. And this is from 1 Peter chapter 1. Praise be to the God and the Father of our Lord Jesus Christ. In his great mercy, he has given us new birth into a living hope through the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead, and into an inheritance that can never perish, spoil, or fade. This inheritance is kept in heaven for you, who through by faith are shielded by God's power until the coming of salvation that is ready to be revealed in the last time. Isn't it great to know that we have this living hope? And when you hear about hope in the Bible, it's just not wishful thinking, it's a firm conviction. It's similar to the faith that we've got directed towards the future, where we know that through Jesus' resurrection that we have hope, and we're going to be resurrected again just the same as Jesus was. So as you see here, our Trinity team has put together and developed a good plan that we're going to be talking with all of you about and presenting. But before we get into it, I'd like to close our devotion with a prayer. So if you could all just join me in prayer, please. And this, I'm going to start with, this is from Psalm 100. There's some of the opening words, and then we'll finish with the prayer, and then we'll go ahead and get into the business of our meeting. Make a joyful noise to the Lord, all the earth. Serve the Lord with gladness. Come into his presence with singing. Know that the Lord, he is God. It is he who made us. We are his. We are his people and the sheep of his pasture. Enter his gates with thanksgiving and his courts with praise. Give thanks to him. Bless his name, for the Lord is good. His steadfast love endures forever, and his faithfulness is to all generations. Lord, we trust you and for all things and in all circumstances in our lives. Lord, we thank you for the assurance you give us, being able to serve, and the living hope that we have in you. Lord, we ask you to bless our time together today and for your guidance, wisdom, and continued blessing to do your work. Amen.
Okay, thanks, Ken. I think you are going to go ahead and share your screen, right? And then begin the presentation on the transition plan.
All right, just to check here, Mark or someone, can you give me a thumbs up that you're seeing just the slides again?
Yep, I see you and your slides, so I think we're perfect. Go ahead.
Great. All right, so once again, thank you to everybody who's participating in our meeting here. We are going to be talking about some important things along the way, and I'm presenting the information on behalf of the entire governing board. Remember, we're your elected representatives for the congregation to help work through some of the policy and work with our senior leadership team. And I want you to know that we are all, as far as for the governing board, all the members of the governing board are panelists in this presentation, but we're always available for questions or things that you might have. And we are going to be asking for questions that you have as we get towards the end of this presentation. So let me go ahead and jump into it. So for some background information, and Mark talked about this a little bit before, but late in 2019 is when Mark let the board know of his decision to retire in 2023. Now, 2023 sounds like a long way away, but realistically, it's not. You know, there's a lot of work and things that we have to do along the way. So, and I'm not, as we go through this, you can find I'm not going to read all the bullets that are going to be coming up here on this presentation, but we as the board took on the responsibility to become or be the call committee for our congregation. And just to touch on something, I know that some of you have been at congregations and things before where you've established a separate call committee. Well, what we determined and what we found out is from talking with folks like our Northern Illinois district president and from talking with other large congregations that it's a best practice if the governing board, maintains that role and understands what's going on. So we as the governing board are acting as the call committee. And remember, we're your elected, everybody that's on the board is elected. And so we think we've got a good representation across all of our sites. But in the January 2020 meeting, we started to recognize that, first we went into this, and it's like, okay, we need a succession plan. Mark has identified his intent to retire, so maybe this should just be an intent or succession plan. But we realized as we started to think about that there's more that needs to be done. And hence, that's why you see it being called a transition plan and not just a succession plan. So what we also knew along the way is that if, and I should also point out the three people on this three-person subcommittee are Doug Dorgan, Sandy Jett, and myself. And as part of that, we knew that we could get more collective wisdom by talking with more people that were out there within the area. So we talked with all of our pastors and our senior staff team. We wound up talking with many other congregations that were multi-site congregations, just so that we could get their insights along the way. And every time along the way, and every person or every group that we wound up interviewing, we wind up gaining more insights and we wind up gaining more wisdom that we have rolled into this overall transition plan. And it's one other thing to make sure and point out, just to remind everyone, we here at Trinity, we are the largest, we have more sites than any other congregation in the LCMS. So we wanted to also make sure and get input from some of the folks that are out there that are like in executive director roles at other multi-site churches, to find out what's going on, because we know as part of our plan, we had to do a number of things. One is, find out who the successor is, but then also come up with what the timeline is, understand what the financial impacts are, and build all of that into our plan. And we're going to be talking about and laying all those things out for you today. We also did talk with, when we're looking as part of, as the plan part of the succession portion of the plan, we did also talk with some other, external candidates as well as we were working through this. All right, so a little bit more background. So we as the board meet on a monthly basis. And since the beginning part of the year, we have made what's going on with this transition plan, a standing item in our monthly agenda. However, as we continue to work through this, and then all the members of the board participated and provided input and some insights along the way, we knew that there was an awful lot to cover. So we had a number of specific meetings just in and around this transition plan and what we were going to be doing with it. And so we built all of that into to tweak what we've got for our plan to try and make it better. And I'm happy and proud of for where we're at and the plan that we've got going forward. So as we continue to work through all of this, after a lot of prayer and thinking about all of this, the board approved the recommendation at our July governing board meeting for the recommendation that we're coming forward with you here today. Remember, this is just the recommendations from the board acting as a call committee. No decisions are being made or have been made already. That's going to be voted on by all of us as the congregation in September. And that's when the vote's going to actually happen and the decision will be made. So here's where we're at as far as for our recommendation. And this is, once again, is the entire board, and these were unanimous decisions from the entire board. We know that in order to have a well-developed plan and timeline to make sure that we optimize the gifts that our team has, and that's part of what we're rolling into this plan. We also know that Pastor Mark, even after he retires, can continue to support our congregation and the larger church overall, just based on the gifts and ability that he has. And also from input that we received from other churches and things, that we're proposing that we select a qualified internal candidate to be the next senior pastor. And with all of that, we as the board believe that God has led us to recommend that Nick Price be called as our next senior pastor. Now let's give that a moment just for a short pause for that to kind of sink in a little bit, because it's a big announcement. But now let me go on a little bit. So many of you know who Pastor Nick is, but there's Pastor Nick's smiling face for all of you. And let me give a little bit, bit of a bio information here about you so that you get to know a little bit more about Nick. So Nick and his wife, Jenny, joined Trinity back in 2008. They've been volunteering and been active in many different roles and activities and leadership throughout our congregation. They have 3 children that are all also very active in Kid Street here, I'm in my house, but over at Trinity Kimberly Way. Nick served for multiple years with the InterVarsity Christian Fellowship, working at the University of Illinois campuses down in Champaign-Urbana and up in Chicago. Nick completed his Master's of Divinity degree at Concordia Seminary in St. Louis, and I think all of our pastors actually went through their formal education and things, and had classes and things through the St. Louis Seminary. But Nick also did the residence plan. Nick was participating in the residence program there at Concordia Seminary, which also helps qualify him to be in the role of senior pastor. And he's been our site pastor for 3 years at Trinity Kimberly Way. Now, let me touch on just briefly some of the reasons besides all of this and the great person that he is, why we're recommending it. Nick is to be our next senior pastor. Nick has demonstrated his leadership, his insights. He knows our culture. And I think that's important because as we went through this plan, we also took into account, if we thought that where we were going as a church, that we were messing up and we were headed towards the ditch, that we would need to make some plans. But I think the culture and things that we've established is a very healthy one. Nick has been a part of that and growing it, and Nick also has a lot of love for our church. But that's part one, and that's probably the big one. But the governing board also believes that as we go forward and to make sure that we're aligned, not just for today, but thinking about where we need to go and where God may be leading us towards the future, is that we recommended creation of a new position, and that's an executive director for our board, who's going to take on some of the daily church operations. You'll see here in a moment from the organizational chart that we'll be showing. Right now, Pastor Mark currently has 16 direct reports. That's just too many, and as we're working through this plan, we want to try and align our organization as well to be best suited for whatever the next things are that God has working for us. We also took into account not only what the timeline for all these things were, but what the actual impact would be for our, as far as for financially. So here's where we are today. This is our current organizational structure. And you can see that we've got Pastor Mark as our senior pastor, our 4 site pastors. Amanda Scabina is our director of children and family ministries. Sally Heckland is our business manager, and then our Catalyst team. For those that don't know, our Catalyst team are a group of people with, their talents and abilities that we wind up sharing across all of our sites with the idea so that we can leverage that in all of our different sites. And so today, and so this is between now and the end of the year, and you'll see the timeline across the top. So I'm going to talk about items until we get up to 2023. So we're presenting what our recommendations are for the next senior pastor and their transition plan here today. And in September is when we're going to be actually presenting, or I'm sorry, is when we as the congregation get to vote on the overall transition plan, and with Pastor Nick being identified as the pastor-elect. So let's go into 2021. In 2021, we're changing the organizational structure around a little bit, and that now we have Pastor Nick in that role as senior pastor-elect, because what we're looking to do here is we know that Pastor Mark's got a lot of experience. Notice I didn't say old, I said he's an experienced senior pastor. But we've got our experienced senior pastor there, and I think it's important from all of that experience and knowledge and things that he's built over the years, that this is time where there can be some mentoring for Nick to help share and understand what needs to go on and what needs to happen. But remember, we talked about the timing when we put this plan together. The timing is important because our current 5-year strategic plan expires in 2022. So we know that we have to get started in the development of that next strategic plan, whatever that time frame is going to be for that. And so we get a chance as far as with Pastor Nick to start working on that, to get input from the rest of our senior leadership team and start building on that. But also notice that within the structure for the first part of the year here, Pastor Nick's still going to be the site pastor over at Trinity Kimberly Way. But then the second half of the year, we're going to start recruiting for this executive director position and then a full-time site pastor over at Trinity Kimberly Way. So now we've worked and made our way into 2022. So now in the beginning of January 2022, Pastor Nick's going to take on the role of being the senior pastor. And at that point in time, some of the input that we got from many different sites is that when that time comes, when you have someone go into that role of senior pastor, it's good for the experienced senior pastor to be able to take some time away. And Pastor Mark has earned some sabbatical time. He earned some previously and didn't take all of it because we kept him too busy. But then he's also earned some more time currently. So for the first 3 to 6 months of 2022, Mark's not going to be around here as far as for the leadership role. I'm anticipating that there may be some golf that's going to wind up taking place during that time. But Mark's going to then take some time away. Pastor Nick's going to be in that role of senior pastor. And then when Mark gets back, then we're going to, he's going to be there as an assistant to the senior pastor, still in a full-time role. And we will have a new site pastor at Trinity Kimberly Way. We are also going to see, as you can see as a change here, we're now going to have the new executive director in place. And the entire Catalyst team now reports to that executive director role. It will be based on our constitution and bylaws up for Pastor Nick and our senior leadership team to determine as far as for who will be in that role of an executive director. Sally Heckland is someone that I know will be considered, and we're appreciating Sally does a lot of hard work, and we're hoping that she might be able to be in that role, but that will be the responsibility of Pastor Nick at that point in time to go ahead and pick the people that are going to be in the roles at that time. All right, now we're in 2023. And as you see here, You don't see Mark's name on the org chart any longer because Mark is retired, but he's only retired from an official full-time ministry role. Mark will continue to be on a part-time position, as I said, working both hopefully here at Trinity and also with the larger congregation as a whole. But we have people in place permanently now as over at site pastors, which you can still see in wherever that person's going to be there at Kimberly Way, and our new executive director. And as I mentioned before, we did, when we looked at this plan, we knew we needed to recognize what's the financial impact going to be. So we modeled that out. And for 4 years, starting in 2020 through this time in 2023, the year-over-year cumulative cost, the total cost right now for what we modeled is $75,000. Now, I also like to remind everybody, and we'll see here in a little bit, our overall budget's over $3 million. So we believe that this cost impact, that God's going to provide what we need through all of you to be able to absorb what the impact for the cost is going to be able to go through this program. So I've talked for a while. Here's some of the key takeaways and some of the things that we're going to point to that, we're going to actually give you some homework here. So today's meeting is just an open forum. In a couple of minutes, we're going to ask and we do want to get your input and your questions because we want to make sure that we understand what's there. It's been mentioned a couple times. We're not voting on anything right now. This is our plan and we want to get your input. But here's your homework. And this was part of the design for our plan. And that is, we wanted to give everyone time to think about this. So we're letting you know all this information in August so that the next month you can think about this and prayerfully consider what we should be doing and ask questions along the way so that in September, we've had sufficient amount of time to be able to think about this and then take a vote in September. And that's going to happen at the special congregation meeting that Mark mentioned earlier, which is going to wind up being September 27th. There will be copies of this part of the video, or there will be copies of the presentation that you can get off of our website that will be loaded up there after that. And if any of you have any follow-up questions after today's meeting, feel free to reach out to me or reach out to Pastor Mark. Keep all the hard questions for Mark. I'll take the easy ones, or you can, contact any other members of our board. And with that, that's the end of the formal presentation part here. And now is when I'd really like to hear some questions from everybody that's been in the meeting.
Ken, I'm going to jump in for just a second here, if I could. And so hopefully you guys can, oh wait, I have to cancel spotlighting Ken. There we go. Okay, so hopefully you guys can see me now. First of all, I'll kind of be a moderator on this and put some questions out there. Some of them I may be able to answer, and some others, Ken, I may throw to you or whatever. But before we get to those questions, I just want to take a minute to, first of all, say thank you to the board, and especially that transition team from the board. I'm just so thrilled with how seriously they took this task and the time that they put in. As Ken said before, they spoke with a number of multi-site large congregations around the country to learn from them, congregations that had gone through a number of different, through a similar kind of leadership transition. And so they learned a lot there. We all learned a lot there. They did just a wonderful job talking to our senior staff. And I really believe that the plan they're bringing to you is from God. And I'm just really thrilled by that plan. I'm also really very excited that this plan is happening. I can't say enough about Nick and the privilege I've had to work with him over these years. I've seen just amazingly great leadership instincts in him. He has a heart for the Lord and a heart for our mission. I don't know if all of you know this, but early in his life, he was not a believer. And so he had that experience of coming to faith later in life. And so he has a passion for people that don't know Jesus, and has a passion for helping people who do know Jesus. As our mission says, look, live, and love more like him. And I could not be more thrilled to know that that is the person that is being recommended to you by the board. Now, remember, the board doesn't make that decision. You as a congregation make that decision. And so that's going to be your decision to make in September, whether you accept that recommendation for the board or whether you want to tell the board, no, go back to the drawing board and find somebody else, do some more work there. All throughout Trinity's history, that's kind of been the way that's worked, that the committee brings one name to the congregation and the congregation either says yep or no. That was the case when I was called, but way back in 2001. We are, so ultimately this is going to be your decision as a congregation in September. Just if you want my personal opinion, I think you guys would be foolish to say anything other than we believe God is calling Nick as well. I couldn't be more thrilled. Trinity means a lot to me, and I am very passionate about our ministry. And to think and pray about the possibility that Nick could be the one that helps Trinity continue to grow and move forward for its mission just makes me thrilled. So I just wanted a chance to say that. There are a couple of questions coming up, and I know one of them was from Greg Zander saying, do we know if this has been a goal for Nick to be a senior pastor? And Doug, did I see that that you wanted to weigh in on that a little bit? Remember, Doug is a member of our board and one of our transition team.
Yeah, I was just going to say that when we talked with the pastoral staff, that was a question that we posed to each of them in terms of who had an interest in this role. And Nick certainly expressed his interest and also demonstrated the work that he's put into ultimately preparing himself for the role. And so I think the answer to that is a definitive yes, and Nick can probably give me a thumbs up on that, just to validate that I've got that correct.
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and unmute Nick there too. So Nick, do you want to say a few words?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Greg. I don't think the board would be bringing my name to you guys unless I had shown a prior interest in it. But yes, I'm very honored that the board, after thinking it through, is recommending me for this role. So I just want to say thank you to you guys for that opportunity. I'm very humbled by that recommendation. And so I would just agree with what Mark said, though. I mean, in September, ultimately, it's your decision as the congregation. And so I know I and my family are going to continue to be in prayer, and we encourage you all to be in prayer as well as you're just kind of thinking this through. But certainly, if that call were to be extended by the congregation to me, I am ready to accept that call and would love to step into that role and look forward to seeing how this plan unfolds.
Okay, cool. Thanks, Nick. I'm going to go ahead and stop your video again for you, Nick, so you don't have to worry about, yep. Oh, you already did it. Perfect. You got it. So good. Another question that's coming up here, Beth asks, Pastor Nick is blessed as an excellent preacher. Will this take him away from regular preaching? I'll go ahead and answer that one. Because I kind of understand that role. One of my blessings as senior pastor is I do get to preach a lot. In fact, before COVID and us being online for worship, when we had 4 sites worshiping in 4 locations, what I would do is I would basically go from site to site each weekend. And so I had a chance to be in all 4 of our sites preaching on a regular basis. That not only gives the site pastor at that site a week off, so he isn't preaching that weekend, but it gave me a chance to be at all 4 of our locations and to have people at all 4 of our locations get a chance to hear me preach. And so the senior pastor does get many opportunities to preach, maybe even in some sense more than the site guys, because again, we are hoping that as we continue to develop people in our sites, that there will be a shared preaching responsibilities at our sites as we continue to move forward. Diane asked the question, are there currently any candidates being considered for the new site pastor for TKW? Ken, do you want to answer that one, or do you want?
Yes. So Diane, thanks for the question. And the short answer is no. Right now, we don't know who that person is that God's going to lead us to. We hope that we do find that out soon and God makes it apparent for that. So that is, as you can see, we've laid out the plan, but there's still work to do in order to actually implement that plan. So that's part of, that's one of the things we're definitely to be working towards.
And I would just add on that, we do have some time based on the timeline. And just let me say just a quick word about the timeline. When I first came to the board, and I shared this with you all in June, but just want to remind you, I told the board I was willing to go through whatever timeline over these next 3 years was best for Trinity. If that meant me being senior pastor for all 3 years, I was willing to do that. If that meant me stopping being senior pastor in September, I was willing to do that as well. Whatever was best from the board's perspective and from the congregation's perspective for the transition. And so that timeline of a new senior pastor elect starting in January and then taking over senior pastor a year from January basically gives me about a year and a half to still be the senior pastor. I reminded the staff the other day, I'm still your boss for the next year and a half. So don't forget that. So that's a blessing, that timing. But that also means that we've got a year and a half before Nick steps full-time into that senior pastor role. Again, part-time next fall, and then full-time starting January of 2022. So we've got some time there, and we will continue to work with all the folks at Kimberly Way and with Nick and his team there to make sure that we don't drop the ball there. We want to make sure that we have someone ready to step into that role. Looking another couple other questions. Can you explain a bit more about the executive director role duties? How does the board see this new position help in the work of the senior pastor? Having executive director, senior pastor certainly growing in popularity and makes sense. So I don't know, Ken, do you want to jump in on that one as well?
Sure. And if anybody else has, Doug or Sandy or any other folks on the board want to chime in, please do. So this executive director, if you remember right now in our current structure, the entire Catalyst team winds up reporting to the senior pastor position. So all of those people and the responsibilities for managing that part of the team would then roll in underneath that executive director position. And that person is also going to be, so that's some of the new responsibilities that go along with it, along with assuming the responsibilities of the position of the business manager position that we currently have in place right now. So it's expanding that role from a business manager that we have and taking on more responsibilities as far as from managing part of the team, along with helping across all of the sites and maintaining so that we can get some economies of scale also between each of the 4 sites, so that if we're doing something, we can try and leverage that, help keep our costs down and manage what we're doing as a church overall. But does anybody else have anything to add?
Yeah, if I could just add a couple quick things. I mean, what we learned as we began talking with members of the team, talking with Mark, is his role is rather unique. He's basically the CEO of the church, in addition to being the senior person responsible for ministry. And one of the things that we felt was that if we could lighten that CEO role in terms of some of the church's more business type operations, that might free up the next senior pastor to be a little bit more focused on ministry and focused on working with the various site pastors and their development, the development of the church as a whole. So the idea here was that we'd shift a little bit of the business operations more into that executive director role, freeing up some of the time for the senior pastor.
And I guess the one last thing I'd add on this question is this isn't exactly a new thing here at Trinity. When I first came as senior pastor back in 2001, some of you may remember we hired Sandy Jett to come on board as the executive director to help me with managing staff. At that point, I had only managed a staff of 2 people, and we had a much larger staff than that, and I needed some help and needed to learn some things about how to manage staff. And so we were blessed to have Sandy come along and have a chance to help me with that. So it's not a new thing. I also want to just weigh in a little bit here. Sherry's asking if Sally did become the executive director, and certainly we would love to see that happen. We're not sure if God knows for sure that if God's told Sally for sure that she's being led to that. She's certainly got time to think and pray about that. And some of that will be up to the new senior pastor. If indeed that is Nick, if you as a congregation choose Nick in that role as is being recommended, he's certainly going to need to be able to weigh in on that, someone who's going to be reporting directly to him and working directly with him as well. But we would certainly at that point take a look at Sally's existing responsibilities and see which of those would stay in the executive director's hands and which of those might go to a part-time controller or something like that. We would certainly sort those out. The last thing we want to do is take a role that the board has decided is too big, and I agree, 15 direct or 16 direct reports is a lot. We don't want to take a senior pastor role and make it more manageable only to put someone in an executive director position that is too big and not manageable. So we would certainly be careful about that. Waltz is asking, were any external candidates considered for the position of senior pastor? I think the short answer to that is yes. I don't, Ken, do you want to say anything more about that?
Yeah, I mean, we did take a look at and talk with some other people and, tried to narrow it down as far as for who would be the right external candidates to talk to as well. One of the things that, and this is, I guess, being a little bit blunt, one of the things that we found out from talking with multiple sites is that somebody doesn't sometimes, as a pastor, want to come in to a site if they want to take on that multi-site leadership type of role, unless they get to kind of form it in their own play, in their own, structure and manner. And we had one person tell us that it was basically, if you think you need to make change, that's fine, but I don't want to come in and work with, work underneath the structure and everything that's, working the right way. So if you think that that's, if you think the direction that you're going is following where God wants you to go, then, I'm not the guy for you. So we did also look at that. And then there's not that many people that are out there right now that actually have the skill sets and abilities that they need to manage a multi-site or, be the senior pastor of a multi-site church. Or if they do, then sometimes they don't have the desire or they're already in that position. So yes, we did take a lot of that into consideration as we identified as far as for when we talk with our external candidates.
Tanya's asking, does Nick need to take any formal education courses to prepare? Will this be on-the-job training during the transition? Well, one of the things, let me take this one a little bit here, and if one of you guys wants to weigh in, please do. One of the things that we've been helping Nick do along the way, just because one of the things we tell staff all the time is your job is to be finding somebody who could replace you someday. In other words, we're always looking to try to give people the education and the skills they need to move forward from wherever they're at in the congregation, whether that's a small group leader, whether that's a small group member, whether that's a small group coach, whether that's a volunteer in our music ministry. We're always looking to help people grow. And so one of the things Nick has been a part of already is something called the Pastoral Leadership Institute Senior Leader. And so that senior leader program was a 2-year program that Nick participated in to help him grow his gifts, so that if at some point, either here at Trinity or somewhere else in God's kingdom, God called him to be a senior pastor, he would have some of the education and things he needed. That said, I'm also really excited about the idea that Nick would be our senior pastor-elect with me as senior pastor for a year. And we would have a full year to work side by side intentionally to give him the specific skills that that God wants to continue to develop in him to succeed well in that role. We do believe, but I'll tell you this, you still don't know what you don't know. And for me, the learning curve was pretty big my first few years. It still is. I mean, this year has been probably the biggest learning curve ever. And so one of the things you look for in a senior pastor is someone who is a lifelong learner and is always seeking to learn and grow. And we certainly see that in Nick. Greg asks, Mark, will you still preach after 2023? And I think I got it right every time this year. I think in June, I kept saying 2013, like I had lost a decade somewhere along the way. Those of you that are a little older know that that can happen easily, where all of a sudden you're like, where did that decade go? Well, we still preach. And I hope so. God willing, assuming that I am physically and mentally able to keep preaching, I would love to do that. But it'll also depend on Trinity's needs. when I talked with our district president about this plan and kind of let him know what Trinity was going to propose to the membership to make sure that he didn't have any questions or concerns. One of his first questions to me was, are you going to be available to do some preaching around the district? And so it's just going to depend on the availability. I would love to keep preaching. It's one of the things I love doing the most. And if our new senior pastor would like me to do some preaching, I would be glad to do that. So there are no more open questions right now. So Ken, maybe we can go ahead and move on with the next agenda item. And please know that, folks, you can continue to type in your questions. You can continue to ask those questions, and we will make sure that we have a chance to address them before the meeting is over. Or again, if you'd rather not ask your question right now, you have a chance to ask those questions to either by emailing Ken or by emailing me, or really reaching out to any member of our governing board as well. So that was our opening divisions and our transition team report. I'm now going to give our site guys a chance to give you just a little update, and I'm getting ready to start their videos here. So that's what's taking me just a second here to do that. And Tony, looks like your video is already up and ready to go. Why don't you go ahead and go first, Tony?
Okay, thanks, Mark. So you guys can see me. I can't see myself, but that's okay. Just to kind of update you guys on what's going on at Green Trails. Back in March, when everything closed down across Trinity, we had 2 operations at Trinity Green Trails that were impacted by COVID, not just our worshiping on the weekend, but the 2 operations we run in our front of house, which is the cafe and the play center, both of which closed daily operations starting in mid-March. And then just to kind of go down the line. So cafe, we closed in mid-March, and we did not open up again until the middle of July. When we were in stage 4, we started opening with limited hours and a limited menu in the cafe at Green Trails. And we continued to do that, and we hope to continue to do that into the future, although patronage will play a big part in that as to whether or not we can develop the clientele and whether people are willing to come. And we're starting to see some people come back, but we're also looking to run the cafe with volunteers as well as some hourly paid staff. So if any of you out there have that skill, we would love to talk with you. The play center is a little bit different animal. We had 40,000 visits a year from the play center. And when COVID hit, that all stopped. And we decided at that point, because we did sell 6-month memberships as well as year-long memberships and daily passes, that we would freeze those 6-month and 12-month passes. And we've continued to do that throughout this pandemic. But also in March, we decided Ashley and her team started to provide weekly programming, or daily programming, and providing that online. So Facebook Live, creating videos and providing that for our customers and anybody that wanted to watch that. And then starting in the middle of July, we started outdoor, as well as continuing the online presence as well. And so Ashley and her team started doing activities in the parking lot on the side from 9 to 10:30 and now 11 during the days. We're not charging for that. We have started asking for donations, but we will continue that through the end of September. At that point, our in-person activities as a play center will cease. We'll no longer offer in-person activities at the play center. We will continue to look at giving online content on the weekend, during the week, and doing that with current staff, the current salaried staff at Green Trails, as well as with the help of the CYF team, the Children, Youth, and Family team would be also helping with that. But the good news is our cafe is open. We are seeing customers come in, and we'd love to see you. So if you're looking for a great cup of coffee, we've got some new items on the menu. Sweet cream latte is my favorite. Although when it's hot, the espresso milkshake is delicious. So that's all I have to say.
Thanks, Tony. Thanks. Now everybody wants a sweet what was it? Sweet chai latte? What was it?
Sweet cream latte.
Sweet cream latte. Wow, that does sound good. So, all right, I'm going to go ahead and spotlight Dave McGinley. Dave, you're on. So why don't you give us a quick update on what's going on at Trinity Galewood?
Yeah, so here at Trinity Galewood, the movement to online worship, led us into where we are right now. And one of the things that's been exciting still moving forward is we were able to hire on Ebony Davis. And so we're so stoked that she's a part of our team, our children and youth director. She's a member of our church and grew up in this community, and already has been such a blessing for the things that are going and happening and moving us forward, because we have a lot of work that we've done at Joseph Lovett Elementary and that partnership, and she's going to be a huge part of that with the ministry here at Galewood. Also this summer, we had our third year of the One Summer Chicago program. Because of COVID, that was all done online through meetings like this, through Zoom. I had my doubts, but it actually turned out pretty well with 20 kids from the neighborhood that learned about some job opportunity experiences and such things like that, which was beautiful. And looking forward, we're doing our outdoor stuff like all the other locations, and excited for September 13th. We have something that's called Comeback Sunday, which is just a big Sunday for us, where we're inviting people in, having a t-shirt and all that sorts of jazz. So we're looking forward to this next season and being together weekly, which will be really beautiful.
Great, cool. Thank you, Dave. Mike, I'm going to go ahead and throw you up there. And Mike, why don't you tell us, give us an update for Trinity South Naperville?
Absolutely. We've so enjoyed being outdoors for worship. And in fact, I think we've retained 40 something in attendance outdoors, which is about 2/3, maybe a little more than 2/3 of what we had before the quarantine came along, which has been great for us to stay connected there. And we've also enjoyed the online opportunities, continuing to meet together in small groups and through online worship. One of the coolest things, though, and one of the most dramatic things that happened to our site was, of course, the shutdown of the tech back when the quarantine hit. And we just a few weeks ago reopened the doors there with DCFS's guidance and the health department. And we're happy to report that as we continue to rebuild the roster and invite folks back and look at new folks coming back in, that we're looking to start in the fall here in just, this next week with 39 students on the roster. So we are making great headway in rebuilding there. And of course, the tech is our #1 kind of front-facing outreach ministry for the site. So we're very excited about getting that rebuilt and involved again in the community. Prayerful and hopeful that as the next few months wear on, we're going to continue to not only bring some people back to our site, but also grow in some new families. So we've had 2 or 3 new ones join us yet just by online contact, which has been really great. So we're blessed and thankful for everybody's support.
Cool. Thank you, Mike. And finally, Nick for Trinity Kimberly Way.
Yeah, so I would just echo what the other site pastors have already shared just about outdoor worship. It's just been wonderful to see everybody's faces. But the thing I wanted to highlight here that's really exciting is since the pandemic started and we had to move to online, we have had a lot of new people getting connected to our ministry. In fact, 9 people registered for our most recent Discover Trinity experience, which we've been doing on Wednesday nights as kind of like a small group almost. And 5 of those are people who got connected to us purely from online. They'd never been in our building before. It was during this pandemic that they found Trinity. Either somebody shared the online link with them, or they were invited by a friend, or they were just searching and found us. And so they have gotten connected with our church and joined Discover Trinity. And it was really fun. I actually got to meet them face to face for the first time at some of our outdoor services this month. So what that just shows me is that when we invite, people show up, that when we invite, it makes a difference in people's lives, and they do want to get connected. And it's just been so great to hear their stories. So my encouragement to all of you is keep inviting people to church. even if it's online. You have a great opportunity to do that. I think the only other two updates that I would give is number two, our building did get struck by lightning, which was kind of crazy, but everything is fine. It was only external damage and a couple of our wireless routers got fried, but otherwise TKW is still here. Obviously I'm in my office, so all is well there. And I also wanted to let you know to keep our preschool in your prayers. We decided not to open our preschool in the fall because once all the surrounding districts went to e-learning, we lost most of our enrollments. So our new preschool director, Ingrid, said that's okay. She brought a proposal to me, which was really, really solid. She said, let's just keep it closed for the fall. She's ready to reopen in January for the spring, and she's not going anywhere. She's already putting together some curriculum and developing some lessons to send to some of our preschool families while they have their children at home so that they can encourage that learning to continue. And so we look forward to, when it's a little bit safer, being able to reopen our doors for our preschool. But we would just covet your prayers. Really appreciate you all praying for us. So thank you.
Thanks, Nick. I am going to go ahead and go back to sharing my screen. This probably goes without saying to all of you, but as you can see, I'm just so thrilled and excited about working with all four of our site pastors. They are a great blessing to their sites and also to me. And probably one of the things that I'm most sad about retiring is that I won't be leading those guys anymore. So they are just a joy, and God is doing some amazing things, even in the midst of very difficult circumstances at all of our sites. By the way, just wanted to give you all just one little tip. If right now you're seeing my screen, and you should be seeing online outdoor worship, and if you want to kind of balance how big you see each of those things, there's a thing up at the top where you can select that you want the presenter and the shared screen side by side, and then you can kind of drag the center line back and forth, so you can either have me really big or really small, depending on which you would rather have. So let's talk about worship a little bit. As you know, in July and August, we've been doing both online and outdoor worship. And let me just say again, online worship is here to stay for the future. We know it may be a long time before some of you are comfortable coming back into an indoor or even an outdoor worship setting with other people. And we have some people that have connected all around the country to our ministry through online worship that may never show up at one of our sites. And so online worship is indeed here to stay. But we've been doing outdoor worship every other week in July and August. And I wanted to give you some sense on how that's going. So far, we have averaged in the 3 weekends we have done outdoors, 434 people between our 4 sites outdoors. And on those weekends, we've had about 850 people online on the same weekend. Now, I do know that some of those are the same people because I see some of you comment at the 10:30 service that you were at an earlier service outdoors or vice versa. So, but that totals up together. Let me get this moving again. That totals up together 1,200, just a little under 1,300 people a weekend connected in worship. Now, on the weekends when we've been online only with no outdoor worship, we've just been a little less than that with 1,268 people online. So either way, whether we are outdoors and online or online, we're reaching somewhere between 1,200 and 1,300 people a weekend in worship. Now, we do want to do a little poll to help us check that number a little bit, because obviously this isn't like Romper Room. I don't know, some of you may remember the old Romper Room show where the lady at the beginning would peer through her magic lens and see into your home and see who was and say your name, right? Now, we know obviously she couldn't see into your home, and we can't see into your home when you're when you're online for worship. So we don't know exactly how many people are worshiping in your home. We've been using a multiplier number that comes from other churches that are very experienced in online worship, that have surveyed this kind of thing, and they have a sense of about how many people are represented by each connection. We compared that to our average household size that we have in our planning centers, in our church record software. But we'd like to take just a second to have you help us test that number. So there's going to be a poll that is going to come up on your screen right now. If I can do this right, let me see if I can get this. There we go. And that poll is coming up, and it says, when you attend worship online, how many people are normally participating in your household? And that would include kids as well. So if you have 2 adults and 5 kids, put in 7 or put 6 or more. We didn't give 7 as an option. But if you could do that, that would be great. Hopefully you can all see the poll. Some of you may be saying, well, wait a minute, I'm on my phone. I don't see the poll. That may be possible. We also know that some people, if you have a pop-up blocker on, it may have prevented you from seeing that poll. But I'm seeing we're up to 120, 130, 132 people have voted in the poll. So we're going to just keep that running for just a little bit more here. Yeah, and I just saw a couple of our panelists are going, wait a minute, I can't vote. Yep, that's true. You can't. So, so it looks like 140 of our 171 have voted now. I'm going to go ahead and end that poll. And I really appreciate you doing that. That does help us get a number that we can use to share. As you can see here, the largest group was 2. We had 11% in that 3, 5% in that 4, 4% in the 5, 1% in the 6, and we had 37 or 26% in the 1. I think, now I'll do the math later when we actually make this list, but I think this is going to come pretty close to confirming the number we've been using to multiply for worship. So that's really helpful and interesting to see. All right, so what about worship moving forward? Well, first of all, as a couple of the guys have mentioned already, our plan in September is to go to every weekend worship starting after Labor Day, outdoors in September. So the September 13th, 20th, and 27th, we will be outdoor. And as always, as I said, online as well. Online is going to be here to stay if you would rather continue to worship online. And our theme for September is going to be called Reopening Christianity. Now, of course, Christianity was never closed, but there's this sense that as we come back together weekly of a kind of a new beginning, and it's a great chance for us to kind of put a stake in the ground and ask ourselves some really important questions that maybe we've had more of a chance to think about during these last few months. Things like, do I see my role at my church as being a contributor or a consumer? Am I out to get my needs met or to help meet the needs of others? Do I want our church to be a church that's open to all? Or is it a church that is really more closed to people more like me? Those kinds of questions we're going to ask, and that will be our theme in the month of September. Then in October, God willing, if things do not change dramatically in our country, we will start indoors for worship and online in October. Now, there were a few people that said, well, why don't we just stay outdoors all through the winter? I said, well, yeah, you go to football games, you sit outside for 3 hours. No, I'm kidding. We wouldn't do that. But we are hoping and praying and planning to be indoors for worship at all 4 of our sites starting the first weekend in October. Now, you're going to have to register in advance because we need to know who is there with us, and we need to make sure we're controlling the numbers to make sure that we can still socially distance and we don't exceed the capacity that we're allowed in our rooms by the rules and guidelines from the state. Masks are going to be required. I know that there are some folks that just don't like wearing a mask or don't believe they're necessary, but we are going to follow the recommendations from our state. And by the way, from a liability perspective with our liability insurance company and the attorneys that we've consulted, and we are going to require masks for worship. You're going to need to wear a mask, and if you don't bring one, we'll have one for you. And we are going to have social distancing. We are going to discourage singing. Now, if you want to sing quietly behind your mask, I'm not sure we'll be able to know that you're doing it. But we are going to discourage singing again because there are some studies that show that loud talking or singing could potentially, if you were positive, spray more virus into the room that could aerosols that could be inhaled by others and could infect them. And so we are going to do that indoor worship in as safe a way as we possibly can. But we do believe that we can do it in a way that is as safe as can be in October. And so that is our plan. Our plan for worship in October and November is our fall campaign called Speaking of Jesus. It's going to revolve around our sharing value, our outreach value, our sharing our faith value. And our goal is very simple for this fall series. We want to increase the number and the quality of our spiritual conversations that we're having with members of our church family and with people outside of our church family. The theme verse that we're using is Romans 10:14 that talks about, before people can ask God for help, they have to believe in him. They have to believe he exists. They have to believe he's there and he cares. But before they can believe in him, they have to hear about him. And they can't hear about him unless someone tells them. And so spiritual conversations, God's word says, are crucial for people knowing Jesus and having the hope that we have. Unfortunately, studies have shown us that Christians are having less and less spiritual conversations. In fact, when they ask Christians, did you have 10 or more spiritual conversations in the last year? And by the way, they defined spiritual conversations very broadly. Simply, you're sitting having dinner on a Sunday and you say to your spouse, hey, what'd you think of Mark's sermon today? Spiritual conversation. Or you're at work and somebody says to you, hey, do you go to church? And you go, yeah, I go to Trinity. Spiritual conversation. And so they ask Christians, those kind of conversations and deeper ones, how many do you have in a year? And only 1 out of 4 Christians said they had 10 or more of those conversations. It's not even 1 a month. 3/4 said they didn't have that many. And so obviously we can improve in that. But here's the interesting thing. In that same survey, they asked not just Christians, but all Americans about this idea of a big change in their life. And 1 in 3 Americans said that they had made at some point in their life a big change in their life because of a conversation they had with someone about faith. So spiritual conversations have the potential to have make an incredible impact in people's lives. And so we are going to have those conversations, and we're going to talk about how to have those conversations. There's one question that's up there that I want to go ahead and answer live about our indoor worship. It says, what is each site doing with the HVA systems to improve air quality during indoor worship, like filters, et cetera? We do believe, again, that aerosol transmission of the disease is possible. There are some studies that suggest that is the case. And they've not been confirmed that you can actually get COVID that way yet. But there are studies that suggest that aerosol transmission of the disease is possible. And so we want to be very safe. And so we've asked each one of our sites to do everything they can to make sure the air quality in the worship space is the best it can be. That does involve things like the possibility of adding some filters in the room that will continue to filter the air. Although one of the things we've learned from some studies is you have to be careful how you do that, because if the filter is pulling all the air in the direction of a few people, it could actually put those people more at risk. So you have to be careful with that. But we are looking at that. One of the key things and easy things that we can do at our sites is in the air handling systems, mix in more outside air. The more outside air you get mixed in, the studies say that the better possibilities are. But at Trinity Galewood, where we don't have a forced air system, that's not possible. So Dave and his team are exploring options there, but we are going to do all we can to make sure that the air quality in those rooms is the best that it could be. Let me move on then to our budget presentation. Another question's coming up about worship. What percentage of capacity would be at each site once we go back to indoor worship? That is going to depend on the site. The state of Illinois guidelines right now are 25% capacity, but those are just guidelines. What we've told our site pastors to do in their teams is to look at social distancing at a minimum of 6 feet and 10 feet if possible. And then based on that kind of social distancing, what they believe the capacity would be. Now that gets a little tricky, because stop and think, if Betty and I registered and went to, let's say, our Kimberly Way site on a weekend, we're 2 people sitting together in one socially distanced place. But if one of those families that selected 5 before in our poll comes, there are 5 people in that same socially distanced site. So the capacity isn't just an easy number we can throw down, but we are looking at that capacity again to maintain a 6 to 10 foot social distancing between those family groups that would be there for worship. And again, just a reminder, we're going to do our best to make indoor worship as safe as possible. And I know a lot of you are eager for that moment when we do. But there are some of you that are going, I don't care how safe you make it. I don't know if I'm going to be comfortable. That's why we're still going to do online worship. And we believe online worship is just as legitimate a way to worship as in-person worship. So you shouldn't feel guilty about that. You shouldn't feel like you're somehow not trusting God in that. We want you in worship. And whether that's in person or online, we want to make sure that you are having a chance to worship together, to worship your God together with other believers. And we're going to do that. Okay, let's go ahead and turn to the budget. And again, I said I would put, this is the handout sheet that's available through our website. If you want to grab that at some point, I'm putting the full thing here on there for you. Again, that would be tlc4u.org/meeting, and you can download it there. You're going to see the exact same thing I'm putting up here. So remember, in June, we passed a 3-month bridge budget, basically using the numbers that were pretty much the previous year's numbers. We did that to give us time, because when we were trying to put a budget together in May, we had no idea what was going to happen and what the impact of this pandemic was going to be. We have a much clearer idea now, although probably, I would say, less solid an idea than any other budget I've ever brought before you. There's still a lot of unknowns, but we believe that this is a budget is always a best guess, an educated guess, and we believe this is a very solid, educated guess we're bringing you today. So our normal assumptions, and some of these are going to sound familiar if you've been at congregations before. We'll invest in our vision, mission, values, and our ministry plans. Our Trinity Galewood and Trinity South Naperville expenses are partially covered by Immeasurably More funds. Remember, we committed $1.5 million of those Immeasurably More funds over to the startup of those 2 sites. Those dollars are running out this year, and you'll see that. It's a smaller amount coming from Immeasurably More funds, and this will be the last year that any Immeasurably More funds go to help the expenses at those sites. But they're partially covered by that. All of our administrative, so that Catalyst team we talked about before, and Green Trails, Kimberly Way expenses, and the balance of the Galewood and South Naperville expenses come through our normal giving and revenue. Our capital needs are funded through Immeasurably More dollars. Again, that was priority number 2, and we will reestablish a capital reserve fund once the Immeasurably More campaign time is done. By the way, I should just really quickly give you an update there. Our Immeasurably More giving is still right on track. It has been strong. It has been exactly what people pledged, and we are so thankful for that. Many of you are giving faithfully in the midst of very difficult and strange times, and we are very, very thankful. And then our budget does include our lease renewal at Green Trails. We have a 10-year lease with 2 5-year renewals, and we are at the end of our first 10-year period. And just in August, our next 5-year period kicked in at Trinity Green Trails on the building there. By the way, we have had some discussions with the owner about possibly extending that lease. I've gotten to know the owner a little bit, and he's very pleased with us as a tenant, especially during these times. And so we have possibility for a lease extension there at some point, but there's no urgency. As I said, we're just beginning our 5-year period. We have another 5-year option beyond that. So some key decisions. First of all, for our revenue projection, for our giving projection for next year, what we are proposing in this budget is the exact same actual number as last year. Normally we propose a 2 or 3% growth in giving. There's been a year we did as much as 4 or 5% growth in giving. We are not anticipating that. We can't anticipate that going into next year just with the unknowns. So we are praying and hoping that people will be able to keep giving. They have been. You have been keeping giving. And so if people continue to give at last year's level, we believe that a no increase budget was a smart thing to do, a safe thing to do right now. You may also remember from our May open forum and our June congregation meeting that Trinity was blessed to take advantage of the government's PPP loan program. And in fact, we got about $500,000 through that PPP loan program. We believe that will all be forgiven and become actual income in this budget. We've used a lot of it, but it will come in and show up as income when that loan is forgiven by the government. And again, we believe it will. We just to again be on the safe side, this budget shows us at 95% of that loan being forgiven and 5% that we would give back or pay back. But again, we believe in all likelihood it will be at 100%. There are no raises for staff in this budget. There was a decision we had to make based on a couple of things. First of all, as you'll see, the numbers are fairly tight. But we also think it's pretty rare that the people who we serve, those of you that are watching this, are getting a raise this year. And so we just felt that's pretty much what the Trinity family is experiencing, and that was the right thing for staff at this point. We are going to continue our synod and church at large giving at our current amounts, so not raising or lowering those. We're going to continue our mission partner giving at the current amount, increasing to our 5th mission partner, Mission India, that we've been talking about as our 5th mission partner. So we are moving back to 5 mission partners. We were at 4 last year, 5 the year before, going back to 5. And then we are going to continue to try to control our healthcare costs and look for increased saving in that area. I shared with you back in June and May that we are part of a program in our synod of larger churches helping with some forecasting and some kind of new ways of looking at healthcare costs and staff health and things like that, and how we can improve our staff health and thereby save on our healthcare costs. And they are helping us with a rebate on our healthcare costs because we're participating in that program. And so we continue to look at that as well. So let's take a look at what those extra numbers are. But before we do that, I just want to share this budget is, I think, a very delicate balance. On one hand, we have this PPP loan revenue that's coming in. It's real revenue. Those are real dollars that, as that is forgiven by the government, is no longer a loan. It's real dollars in our budget. And using it to cover some of the losses that we are experiencing, like at the tech with a smaller enrollment, or like at Grounds for Hope with business being closed and for a while and smaller. So using those dollars in some way, and also with those dollars and that blessing, actually buying some time for some further growth to happen at our Galewood and our South Naperville sites. Well, at all 4 of our sites. So there's, let's use those dollars. They're a gift. God has blessed us through our government with that. We have a chance to use those and buy some time to get through this pandemic and move forward. But by the same token, we have to prepare for the future here. And as those immeasurably more dollars are no longer there for our Galewood and our South Naperville sites, and as there may be some new realities for our ministries based on life never really going back to the same after this pandemic, we have to think that through as well. And we can't just spend everything we have and say, well, we won't worry about the future. We've got to look to the future. We have to be careful there as well. So this budget, I believe, is a very delicate balance between those two things. So let's go ahead and take a look at numbers. And I'm going to actually stop sharing that. And I'm going to actually share my spreadsheet itself with you so I can highlight some things in that for you. Hopefully you can see that now. So on this, you've got, first of all, you've got the fiscal year 19 actual numbers in all these different areas. And then you've got last year's fiscal year 20 numbers in all those areas as well. So you have 2 years of history that you can compare to. By the way, if you'd like to see where our actual compared to our budget for fiscal year 20. We did share that at the June congregation meeting. I still have that handout available to you and be glad to share that with you if you want to see how our actual compared to budget for last year. But since we already shared that, I didn't put that information on here. It was making it a little needlessly complicated. So you've got 2 years worth of history to look at here. You've got the first 3-month budget that you approved back in June. You have the balance, the next 9-month budget that we are bringing before you today for your comment, and we will ask you to vote and approve in September. And then you have the total, so you can actually compare apples to apples here, the total budget here to the fiscal year 20 actual there. Let me talk about a few things. First of all, remember I said we are projecting no increase in giving. So we were at 2.75 million there. We were at 2.75 million projected for this next year. We are praying that people are able to keep giving at the levels they have. So far during this pandemic, that has been the case. Our giving ended the year slightly ahead of the previous year's giving this past year. So, but we're being conservative and not projecting any giving growth. Notice here that the amount of money coming in to help with the expenses at Galewood and South Naperville from Immeasurably More, it was over 400,000 in the previous 2 years. It's only a little over 200,000 in this one. And again, that's because that's the balance of the 1.5 million that was committed. And so it's 2.17 or 217,000 here. It will be nothing next year. So down from 424 last year, 217 here. And again, that's because this year we will use up the full of that 1.5 million committed from Immeasurably More. Remember, the rest of those dollars are going to go for some other big capital projects that we have and things like that. Here's that PPP loan amount. Our actual loan amount was a little over 500,000. That is still considered a loan until it's forgiven by the government. That's why it doesn't show up as income here, even though we receive those dollars before the end of the fiscal year. But when it is forgiven, and we are going through the process of having that forgiven, we are very confident that we use those funds properly and they will be fully forgiven. So it will come in as income in this year. And again, that's the tricky thing here. It's real income. It will affect our bottom line. But if we just spend it all and don't think about the future, we're supporting a budget that's too big because those dollars won't be there next year. And we're also not bringing any surplus into the following year as well. And so we have to be careful about that. So that puts us at an income of about 3.5 million. You'll see again that's where I'm indicating that we are going to be at 5 mission partners again. And we are so thrilled that we continue to make a difference in the lives of people, not only here in our community through our Voice of Care ministry that we are a part of, but through Mission India, through Niños con Valor, the orphanages of Bolivia. Just a quick little side note, because I know this meeting is going long, but a quick little side note, please pray for the orphanage in Bolivia, Niños con Valor. The pandemic has taken kind of an ugly turn down there in Bolivia. There's a lot of social unrest, a lot of mistrust in hospitals. The food chain is breaking down in some ways. And so please keep Tyson and all the kids at the orphanage down in Bolivia in your prayers. So 5 mission partners there. Here you can see the expenditures we're planning in all the different ministry areas. Here's our compensation line. The vast majority of what you give goes to help support our staff, a huge percentage of that. But you can see that number is significantly less than the last 2 years. That's because we are eliminating some part-time positions in this budget. There are some positions that because of things like the play center at Trinity Green Trails not in operation this year, we just can't support those positions, and so that is reflected in this budget. So bottom line total expenses of 3.2 million, which, as you can see, is a surplus of almost $300,000. Again, if we spent all those monies this year, we wouldn't carry anything into next year, and we wouldn't be able to support this kind of ministry activity next year because we will not have those PPP loan dollars in there. So showing a surplus of about 300,000 in this budget. Notice some of that is going to get eaten up by some losses in those other ministries. The Grounds for Hope is anticipating a fairly healthy loss this year, even with the play center being shut down because of the lack of revenue over these last few months, because there are some salaries of some full-time staff that we still use some on the ministry side that we want to keep those people employed and in place. And so there's a significant loss there. But again, we have the PPP loan dollars to cover that loss. Nick talked about this. Our TKW preschool is going to wait to start in January. But even with that start, we are anticipating that we will lose some money there. Now, it's possible that enrollment is better than we anticipated as we go into next year and that those losses aren't there. But again, this is a very conservative budget. And the same thing with the tech. Again, Mike talked about 39, I think he said the numbers that we're anticipating in September. We are hoping to see some continued growth in that as the year goes on and as parents are more comfortable with having their kids or needing to have their kids in daycare. But you'll see most of that loss really is already occurring in these first 3 months. And once we get rolling in the fall, the loss for these next 9 months is not as severe. So when you factor in those losses, we're still looking at about $140,000 surplus that we would carry into next year to help with ministry. And again, you may say, well, why don't we just spend those dollars and use them? It's that balance again of we have to be careful. We don't know exactly how this year is going to go. And we can't, again, overspend this year only to find ourselves facing a real problem next year as those PPP loan dollars are not there. So I'm going to go ahead and stop that and take a look back here to our, just want to see now if you have any further feedback or questions. Remember, again, we are not asking you to vote on that budget today. We're presenting it to you. Again, I'd encourage you, if you'd like to look at that in more detail, to either watch this presentation again. We are videotaping it and it will be available for you to watch, or go to our website and download that FY21 budget file so you can look at it in more detail. We welcome over these next few weeks your questions or comments so that you are going to be ready in September to approve that budget for us to finish the rest of the year. So looking to see if there are any questions coming up right now. And I'm not seeing any so far. We'll give you just one more second. It's been fairly long meeting. We've been about an hour and a half with a lot to talk about. Again, just a chance for me to say how excited I am about the future at our congregation. We've had some huge challenges over these last few months. There's no doubt about it. But as we have returned to outdoor worship and had that joy of being together again, as we look forward to indoor worship happening at some point later this fall, again, the plan is first week in October, and we're fairly confident that will stay unless there's some huge uptick or something in the number of cases here in Illinois. And with the hope and prayer that a vaccine will be coming to help us, or new treatment methods will be coming, so that at some point we can start to move back to life that is more normal. The amazing thing is, as Ken said before, God has been faithful through this all. And we have seen blessings, and we have seen amazing things happen. Again, when you think about it, our worship attendance, there's probably somewhere between 300 and 400 more people connecting now weekly with worship than was before. We're very hopeful. We know that all things work together for good for those that love the Lord, as God says. There's a question just came up. Narvely asks, who heads the budget or governing board of ministry? So the way that process works is, as the senior pastor, I am in charge of presenting a budget to the governing board. Typically what happens is about 2 months before the end of, or 2 months before the open forum. So in a normal year, that would be in March. At our March board meeting, I bring a preliminary plan to the board. We always budget based on our ministry plan and objectives. And so I bring those assumptions and some key decisions to the board. I bring some numbers that support our ministry plan and budget. And then in April, we finalize those numbers. In May, those numbers are brought to the congregation for the open forum, and then in June, in a typical year, they're approved. But the nuts and bolts of the budget itself, the staff is responsible under the leadership of the senior pastor for preparing that budget. The governing board does not get into details like, why did you spend, $2,000 for outreach here and $400 for this thing here. The board stays at a fairly high level and looks at the overall impact of that budget, and it's really up to the senior pastor and staff to manage it. There's a question, an anonymous question here. Is there something in the budget for local emergencies? Remember, we have something called the Good Sam Fund, and we asked you to give to that fund last spring again to further replenish it, and you responded amazingly well. The fund we do have funds available to help with local emergencies, specifically in people's lives, but we also always are ready to respond as a congregation. We have designated funds for some of those kinds of things that are not part of our annual budget. And by the way, Trinity does something better than any church I've ever been a part of, and that is, we are very, very careful that we use designated funds for what they're designated for, and we use our budget and our budgeted funds for what they are given for. And I've been part of churches that just kind of all the money was kind of in the same pot, and you drew from that and weren't always as careful. And Trinity does not do that. Another question that's come in is, does TLC have an endowment fund? We do have an endowment. There's no money in it right now. We know that there's, oh gee, and Sandy, correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I believe our last report, there was somewhere between $3 and $5 million in future gifts that have been committed to that endowment. Remember, our endowment is a mission endowment, meaning that it can only be used, it can't be used for our regular operating expenses. It can only be used for either international mission work that we want to support, domestic mission work or mission work here in the Chicago area that is being maybe, or Chicago, or the US, that maybe other congregations or parachurch groups are doing that we want to support, or it could be used for a new mission start that the Trinity would do. So if we would open Site 5 or start a new outreach ministry, that would be possible as well. But that's through that endowment. And right now there isn't any money in the endowment. It's set up, it's ready. I jokingly say some folks are going to have to die before there's money in there because they've committed some of those funds to go in there from their estate. I know Betty and I have done that. When Betty and I pass away, 10% of our estate is going to go directly into that mission endowment. And I know a number of you have those kind of plans as well. And so we're very thankful for that. And so, yeah, that is our mission endowment. By the way, you don't have to wait till you die to give to that endowment. So if there's, if that tugs at your heart and you'd like to find out more about that, you could reach out to me, or you could reach out to Sandy Jett on our governing board, who helps us with that. There's a question here. It says, we heard you say the Immeasurably More giving is on track. How is the regular giving trend since March? So since March, it's been a little bit of a roller coaster. And maybe Sally, are you still with us? Looks like she is. I'm going to unmute Sally and see if I can start her video, because maybe Sally would want to weigh in on that. Sally, can you give us just a little history of March, April, May, June, July from a giving perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. Hello, everyone. I would just echo Mark's thanks to all of you, because honestly, our giving through the pandemic has been so much stronger than we thought it would be. And so it fluctuated through those months in the spring, but so much stronger than we anticipated, with just hardships that people are enduring. And so for the year, we kind of look at more year to date than, month by month. And year to date, we were only slightly under our budget by about 2%, I believe. But our giving for this past fiscal year actually came slightly above the previous year. And that's always what we look at. Did we hold our own, and did we have a little bit of growth in giving over the prior year? And we did. So honestly, God's people have been so generous, and we are truly thankful.
Thanks, Sal. Appreciate that answer. Another question coming up here is, and going to go ahead and make sure, Sally, you don't have to be on video there anymore. Okay, I think everybody can see me again. Another question is there a fund for LERT? That's our, I always get this wrong. It's either Lutheran Emergency Response Team or Lutheran, oh, I guess it is Lutheran Emergency. Anyway, it's our alert team, and they respond to emergencies, and they are Lutheran. Yes, there is. There's a designated fund for our alert team. Our alert team responds to things like, for example, when we had the derecho the other day. Had any of you ever heard of a derecho before? I think I got that right. I hadn't, but we had one. It's 2020, of course. By the way, did you also know there's a fairly large asteroid that's going to come close to Earth the day before the election? It's 2020. So, but when that happened and there were people with trees down and things like that, our alert team was available to go out and help. And we have a mobile kitchen now that is owned by Lutheran Church Charities that our emergency response team is able to utilize. It used to be that they'd go out and they'd find a local church and they'd cook and serve meals. Now, even if there isn't a local church that can help, they can bring that trailer and they can serve meals and help people that are doing emergency response. Our alert team does an awesome job. And yes, there is a designated fund for that alert team if you wanted, we're led by God to give to that. Another question, how will the transition pastor plan and possible call if that passes in September? And again, just let me reiterate that. The governing board is recommending a timeline to you, and they are recommending a person to you. Ultimately, it is the congregation's decision as to whether you believe Nick is the person God is calling to be the next senior pastor. That will be your decision and your call to make in September. And as has been done in the past at Trinity, I don't know that it ever happened this way, but it could have. You know, one name is brought to the congregation for senior pastor. The congregation either approves that name or not. And if not, then the board would go back to work to look for the person that they believe God might be calling. I remember they had told me that Trinity folks had told me, and I think it was like May of 2001, that they were going to recommend my name. Then they decided not to, and they recommended a different name. That person considered it and said no, and then they came back in September and said, no, we are going to recommend your name this time. And the congregation said yes, and Betty and I believe God was calling us here. So you will have that opportunity to not only approve the transition plan, but the person that the board is recommending. And then if that passes, it says, how will the transition pastor plan be communicated at the sites other than TKW? Well, first of all, remember, this isn't just TKW on this today. This is people from all 4 of our sites. And we, at the congregation meeting, will be people again from all 4 of our sites. And we will continue to communicate to the whole congregation for that. I hope I understood that question and answered that question possibly. Another question here is, when is the meeting in September? That meeting is September 27th at 12:30. That's a Sunday at 12:30. My guess is, again, since we are not going to be indoor for worship until October, that we will also do it in this fashion, a webinar as well. And by the way, we toyed with the idea of some sort of, allow 50 people in person and the rest on the webinar or something like that, because that would be according to state guidelines right now. But we just don't think that works. It may not be fair for the 50 that are able to get there. They're going to experience it differently. We're not sure exactly how we would do the technology to speak to a room full of people and through a webinar. And so it will be either all in person. Really doubt that that's going to happen. In all likelihood, it will be a webinar in September. Another question here. Can people direct their gifts, something specific to within the church or overseas through the endowment? The answer to that is no. But let me put a caveat on that. You can designate one of those 3 buckets. So you could say, I want to give to the endowment, but I want it to be only foreign missions. Or you could say, I want to give to that endowment, but I want it only to be new things that Trinity is going to do. You could do it that way. The problem with letting the designation happen too specifically is if you say, well, I want to give to the endowment and I want it to go to Lutheran World Relief, we would say, just give it to Lutheran World Relief. You don't have to work through us to do that. You can just give it directly in that way. Okay, I'm not seeing any other questions. I know, Ken, is there anything final that you want to say to folks before we maybe do a closing prayer here?
Other than thank you, everybody. Getting your input on this and making sure we answer any of your questions before we get to our September meeting is important. So if you do have any other questions, feel free to reach out to any of us. We welcome that input. We're also looking forward to see what God's going to continue to do through and with Trinity. So that's all I've got, Mark.
Okay, cool. Thanks, Ken. So I'm going to go ahead and say a closing prayer. And for those of you that have sat in front of Zoom long enough in your life lately and can't wait to get off this, please feel free to drop right off. If you still have a question that you want to ask directly in the Q&A, I'll stay online here a little bit. And if there's anything I can answer for you, I would remind you again that all of our governing board members, their information is on the website. and each of them have a tlc4u.org email address. It's their first name, their last name, and the email address. So if you want to email Justin Zeman, it's justin.zeman@tlc4u.org. Or if you want to email Paige Craig on our board, paige.craig@tlc4u.org. So that is, those are available to you. My email is mark.schultz, don't put a T in Schultz, at tlc4u.org. You can certainly email me. Be glad to do whatever we can to get you the answers that you need for your questions, again, before that September meeting. And if you have feedback, again, I encourage you, send me an email. We take the feedback from this open forum very, very seriously. Just real quick before I pray, one more question here was, when is the rebroadcast available? It typically takes the rest of the afternoon for this to get fully rendered through the site. And then we asked Dan Franzen, who is a member of our team, to actually take the download dump from that. And we're going to make the whole thing available to you, and we're going to make just the transition plan part of it available to you as two separate things. And I would guess that by late Monday or early Tuesday, those will be available. We will put something out through our normal, like our site-based e-news, just to make with links, so those are available to you if you want to watch this again or go back and look at a particular part of it again. You can do that. So, but let's go ahead and bow our heads and pray. Lord God, you are the God of the church, and that means we are your people. I heard someone say this once, that the church doesn't have a mission; the mission has a church. That we are a part of your mission, your work in this world, and we are a way in which you work in this world, and we are thankful that we are that tool in your hands. But that also means that it's your church; it's not our church. And so when we do things like vote on budgets or even vote on new senior pastors, we're not voting our own personal preference. What we're voting is your will, what we believe your will to be. And we believe, God, that you speak through your people. Your spirit guides and directs, and you speak through your people. And so, Lord, I pray that just in advance right now, that you would speak through your people in September, whether that's about approval of this budget or whether that's about that transition plan and new senior pastor, Lord, that you would speak through your people. Lord, we do pray for all of those who call Trinity their church home, and we pray for this community in which we're in. These are very, very strange and difficult times. Lord, let us be a light in the darkness. Let us be hope for the hopeless. Let us be strength for those who are weak. Let us be encouragement to those who feel they just can't go on and take another step. Lord, we can't do that on our own. We can only do that through the power of your spirit at work within us. So Lord, send us your spirit. Bless us in all we say and do. And in your name we pray. Amen. Again, thank you all so much for being part of this. We had a huge number of people on board today, and it was just a real blessing to be able to share this important information with all of you. Pray that you have a great rest of the day. Pray that you have a great week. And again, I will stay on here. If there's any more questions that come in over the next few minutes, we will do our best to answer them. So thanks, and God's blessings, everyone. Thank you to our panelists too. Really appreciate all of you being on here today. And if there's any further feedback that you guys have for me, please don't, or for Ken, please make sure that you get that to us as well. But thanks to our panelists too. I'm not seeing any other questions coming up, so. Thanks for a few of you that chimed in. I'm noticing a few of you did stuff like interpreted Paige. Thanks for interpreting Good Sam for me to Good Samaritan Fund. I appreciate that in the chat and stuff like that. Is there one more open question? Can you make a video of how you pull off the online service? No, that would be interesting. Yeah, it'd be kind of fun to go ahead and put something out about how we make online services happen. It's just real quick, if you want to hear a story, a good friend of mine who grew up in Detroit, city boy, his first call as a pastor was to rural Missouri. And the men's club, about a month into his call, said, "Hey, you want to show up on Saturday, Pastor, and help us make the sausage for the sausage dinner on Saturday night?" And he said, "Sure." And he showed up, and there were 3 pigs in a pen alive in the parking lot that they butchered and made the sausage. And he said it was the worst day of his life. So yeah, it may be interesting to show you how the online service is made. It may be a little bit like making sausage. It may be not exactly what you expect. Things get taped all over the place. And Dan Franzen is our video guy who does just an amazing job of pulling that all together and making it into a cohesive worship service. We meet actually twice a week, once on Monday and once on Wednesday, to make sure that we're pulling that service off with regularity. And it's been kind of fun and a joy to make that happen. So that's been kind of cool. So. All right, not seeing any other questions again. Oh, somebody did ask how many people were on. Did that get answered? I think it might have. How many participants? Yeah, at the highest peak we had 204 on. Oh, cool. Paige, thanks. We had 270 registered, so I'll go back and look. Sometimes the number that shows up online to show how many are on isn't exactly accurate, but the report we get later is very accurate. We found that with our online services on the weekend as well. So some of you may be online and see it says 134. It may be 234 sometimes. That number isn't always updated. So I will certainly take a look and let people know what that final number is. So. All right. Well, thanks again, everybody. I'm going to go ahead and sign off too. We're down to only 30 attendees. People are fading fast. So again, panelists, thanks so much. And God's blessings to all of you. Have a great rest of the day.